Before we descend into the sterile corridors and shadowed alcoves of this operation, if you appreciate these deep dives into the invisible wars fought in our cities, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are exposing the machinery of intelligence that governments deny, and your support helps us keep the lights on in the archives. Now, let's go back to London, 1982. The rain in London does not wash things clean. It merely makes the grime slicker, harder to hold on to. For the handlers sitting in the safe house in Kensington, the weather was a fitting metaphor for the past 6 months. The network was slipping. Assets in Beirut were going silent, not in the way that suggests a technical failure, but in the permanent, terrifying silence that suggests they had been compromised. Safe houses in Paris were being raided hours after operatives vacated them. The timeline of betrayal was so precise, so surgically accurate, that it defied coincidence. This was not sloppy tradecraft. This was a leak. And not just any leak. It was coming from the inside of the medical infrastructure that supported the service in Europe. In the intelligence world, the medical corridor is a sacred, untouchable line. Operatives get hurt. They break bones jumping from balconies in Brussels. They suffer burns from incendiary devices in Hamburg. They contract fevers in the Bekaa Valley. They cannot go to public hospitals where police reports are filed. They go to the Sayanim, the helpers, doctors, clinics, and private nurses who operate in the gray zone, providing care without questions, keeping records that exist only in memory, never on paper. The leak had been traced to a private clinic in Chelsea, a facility known for its discretion and its wealthy, international clientele. It was a place where a diplomat could recover from a fall that looked suspiciously like a beating, or where a businessman could detox from substances that weren't strictly legal. It was also the primary recovery site for Mossad operatives in Western Europe who needed mid to long-term care. The suspect was not a doctor. Doctors were too detached, too busy with the mechanics of repair. The suspect was a nurse. Her name, in the files, was designated as Nightingale. In reality, she was Sarah Thorne, a senior nurse with 10 years of impeccable service. She was efficient, skilled, and possessed the kind of forgettable face that is an asset in the clandestine world. She had clearance. She knew the names. She saw the faces of men and women who were supposed to be ghosts. And somewhere between the changing of IV bags and the checking of pulses, the information was flowing out. The decision was made in Tel Aviv, in a windowless room filled with smoke and the hum of air conditioners fighting the Middle Eastern heat. They couldn't just pull her in. Interrogation is a blunt instrument. If she was a double agent, she was likely trained to resist. Or worse, she was a cutout who didn't know the true value of what she was selling. If they grabbed her, the network she was feeding would vanish. They needed to see the hand that took the information. They needed a trap, and the bait had to be irresistible. The profile of the bait was crafted with the same attention to detail used to build a nuclear centrifuge. He needed to be high value, he needed to be helpless, and he needed to be placed directly in her care. Enter Ari Ben-Zvi. In the field, he was a legend, a man who could blend into a souk in Damascus or a board meeting in Zurich. But for this mission, his greatest asset would be his stillness. He would not be the hunter running across rooftops. He would be the prey, tethered to a bed, his leg in traction, his body a map of staged trauma. The briefing was short. "You are going to be a patient," the director told him. "You are going to be vulnerable. You will be in pain, or at least you will act like it. And you will wait for her to make a mistake." Ari looked at the file. Sarah Thorne's face stared back, calm, professional, a hint of a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And if she decides to finish the job instead of just selling me out?" The director didn't blink. "Then we will know for sure." The operation was greenlit. They called it vital signs. But as Ari walked out of the briefing, he knew the truth. He was walking into a cage, locking the door, and handing the key to the woman who might be his executioner. Creating a legend, a cover identity, is an art form. It requires more than a fake passport and a driver's license. It requires a history, a texture to the life that can withstand the casual scrutiny of boredom. Nurses talk to their patients. They ask about family, about work, not because they are spies, but because the silence of a hospital room is heavy. Sarah Thorne would be spending 12-hour shifts with him. If the backstory had a single crack, she would find it. They created Simon Vance. Simon was a logistics coordinator for a defense contractor, a job boring enough to explain the lack of fame, but important enough to explain the security clearance. He was a man who moved things, sensitive things, across borders. The kind of man who knew where the shipments were going, but not necessarily what was in them. This was the hook. An intelligence officer is valuable, but a logistics man, he knows the routes, he knows the schedules. To an enemy service, he is a gold mine. The injury had to be convincing. They couldn't break Ari's leg for real. Operational readiness couldn't be sacrificed to that degree. But they could simulate the aftermath of a severe orthopedic trauma. A cast was applied, heavy and restrictive. The medical charts were forged by a Sayan doctor in London, detailing a complex fracture requiring traction and heavy sedation. The physical preparation was grueling. Ari spent a week learning how to atrophy. He studied the movements of men in chronic pain, the way they guarded their bodies, the shallow breathing, the specific grimace that comes when shifting weight. He stopped shaving. He let his hygiene slip just enough to smell like a man who has given up on vanity. But the most dangerous part of the preparation was the chemistry. Sarah Thorne was a senior nurse. She knew drugs. She knew the dilation of pupils under opiates, the slurred speech, the slowing of the heart. Ari couldn't actually be sedated. He needed his wits sharp every second, but he had to appear medicated. The lab technicians in Tel Aviv worked on a cocktail. They provided him with eye drops to dilate his pupils. They taught him breathing techniques to artificially lower his heart rate during checkups. And they gave him a replace and discard protocol. When she handed him pills, he had to palm them. If she injected him, that was the danger zone. "If she brings a syringe," the medical officer warned him, "you have a problem. We can't fake the reaction to an intramuscular injection of morphine. If she injects you, you're going under. So avoid the needle," Ari said, practicing the slight tremor in his hand that would be Simon Vance's signature. "Refuse it," the officer said. "Make Simon Vance afraid of needles. Make him a difficult patient who prefers oral meds. It fits the psychological profile. Control freaks hate losing consciousness." They flew him into London on a private medical transport. The weather had turned colder, a biting wind coming off the Thames. He was transferred to an ambulance, strapped to a gurney, his world narrowing to the ceiling of the vehicle and the rhythmic beep of the monitor. The clinic was a converted Victorian townhouse, elegant and imposing. Inside, it smelled of expensive antiseptic and old money. There were no fluorescent lights humming ominously here. Instead, there were soft lamps and thick carpets that muffled the sound of footsteps. It was a place where pain was managed with discretion. Ari was wheeled in through a side entrance. The intake was handled by the clinic administrator, a man who knew enough not to ask why Simon Vance had no family visitors listed. "Room 404, the administrator said quietly. "Top floor. Private." As they wheeled him into the elevator, Ari closed his eyes. He began the mental descent. He was no longer Ari Ben-Zvi, the man who had tracked terrorists in Munich. He was Simon Vance, a man in pain, a man with secrets he was trying to keep, a man alone in a city that didn't care. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. And there she was. She stood at the nurse's station reviewing a chart. Sarah Thorne. She looked exactly like the photograph, yet different. The photo hadn't captured the efficiency of her movements, the way she dominated the space without speaking. She looked up as the gurney approached. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and completely unreadable. "Mr. Vance," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, with a clipped British accent that sounded like it had been polished in expensive schools. "I'm Sarah. I'll be looking after you tonight." Ari let out a groan, a performance of pain and irritation. "Just get me to the bed," he rasped. She walked alongside the gurney, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder. It was a comforting gesture, the touch of a healer, but Ari felt a chill go down his spine. It was the touch of someone assessing the merchandise. Room 404 was less a hospital room and more a hotel suite that happened to have oxygen ports in the wall. The windows were draped in heavy velvet, blocking out the London night. There was a television, a small library of books. and a specialized orthopedic bed that looked like a medieval torture device redesigned by a minimalist architect. The transfer from gurney to bed was the first test. Ari had to be dead weight. He had to let them heave him, gritting his teeth, sweating with the exertion of doing nothing. Sarah directed the orderlies with short, precise commands. She was in charge. She checked the traction pulleys, adjusted the weights, and smoothed the sheets with a terrifying exactitude. When the orderlies left, the silence of the room became oppressive. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the ticking of a clock on the wall. "How is the pain, Simon?" she asked. She used his first name, a tactic to build intimacy, to break down barriers. "It's fluid," Ari said, using the prepared line. "Throbs, then stabs." "We have you scheduled for hydromorphone," she said, checking his chart. "It helps with the deep bone pain." "No needles," Ari said quickly, perhaps too quickly. He forced a cough to cover the urgency. I don't like needles. Pills. Only pills." Sarah paused. She looked at him, her head tilting slightly to the side. It was the first moment of genuine scrutiny. "Oral medication takes longer to act, Simon. If the pain is severe, I can wait," he snapped. "I hate the feeling of being under, losing time." "Control is important to you," she observed. It wasn't a question. "In my line of work, losing focus is expensive," he said. He closed his eyes, feigning exhaustion. "And what line of work is that?" The question hung in the air. It was standard chatter, yet it wasn't. It was the first probe. "Logistics," Ari mumbled. "Moving boxes, boring stuff." "Boring stuff usually doesn't result in injuries like this," she said softly, adjusting his pillow. "Car accident," he lied. "Wrong place, wrong driver." She didn't press further. She walked to the medicine cabinet in the corner of the room. Ari watched her through his eyelashes. She moved silently. She unlocked the cabinet, the keys jingling softly. She took out a small paper cup. "Here," she said, returning to his side. "2 tablets. They'll help you sleep." Ari reached out. His hand trembled. He took the cup. He tipped the pills into his mouth, and in a movement he had practiced 1,000 times with tic-tacs in a mirror, he slid them under his tongue. He swallowed air, making a gulping sound. "Water," he croaked. She held the glass to his lips. He drank, careful not to dislodge the pills. "Good," she said. "Rest now. I'll be at the station just outside. If you need anything, press the button." She dimmed the lights and left, the door clicking shut behind her. Ari waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. He listened to her footsteps fading down the hall. He sat up, spat the pills into his hand and wrapped them in a tissue he had hidden in the sleeve of his gown. He shoved the tissue deep into the hollow of the traction device, a temporary hiding spot. He lay back down. The room was cold. He was alone. But he wasn't really alone. He knew the room was bugged, not by her, but by his own team. Somewhere in a van parked 3 streets away, Aitan, his handler, was listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Phase 1 complete, Ari thought. "I'm in." But as he stared at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling of her hand on his shoulder. It hadn't felt malicious. It had felt competent. And a competent enemy is the worst kind. He began to run the scenarios. If she was a double agent, she wouldn't act tonight. She would watch. She would wait to see who visited him. She would wait to see if he made phone calls. He had to give her something. A ghost needs to haunt the house to be believed. He decided that later, in the dead hours of the morning, Simon Vance would have a nightmare. And in that nightmare, he would say a name that Sarah Thorne would recognize. The routine of a hospital is a form of psychological warfare. The waking at odd hours, the constant intrusion of personal space, the stripping away of dignity. For 3 days, Ari Bensvi endured it. He let Sarah bathe him. He let her change his dressings. He let her feed him when his shaking was too bad to hold a spoon. It was humiliating, and that was the point. Intimacy breeds carelessness. Sarah was perfect. That was the problem. She was too perfect. She never complained. She was always there before he rang the bell. She anticipated his needs. To the untrained eye, she was an angel of mercy. To Ari, she was a vault. She gave nothing away. She spoke little of herself, deflecting questions with a practiced ease. "Do you have family in London, Sarah?" he asked on the second afternoon, as she checked his blood pressure. "A sister," she said. "But she travels." "Travels where?" "East," she said. "She likes the heat." Vague, non-committal. "I spent time in the East," Ari said, dropping a crumb. "Beirut, before it all went to hell." He felt the cuff on his arm tighten. He watched her face. Not a flicker, not a twitch of the eye. "Beautiful city, I'm told," she said, releasing the pressure valve. 120 over 80. You're holding up well, Simon." She was good. She was very good. But everyone has a tell. Ari began to watch her hands. When she was calm, her hands were steady. But when he mentioned certain locations, Damascus, the Bekaa, Cyprus, he noticed a micro-movement in her fingers. A tapping, a rhythmic drumming against her thigh or the clipboard. It was a release of nervous energy. On the third night, the first crack appeared. It was 3:00 a.m. The clinic was silent. Ari was feigning sleep, his breathing deep and rhythmic. He heard the door ease open. He didn't move. Through the slit of his eye, he saw the beam of a pen light. It was Sarah. She wasn't doing rounds. There was no medical cart, no clipboard. She moved to the side of the bed. She stood over him, watching. The light played over his face, then moved down to the bedside table. His wallet was there, his watch, and a small leather-bound notebook that Simon kept for his logistics work. Ari commanded his heart to stay slow. "Don't react, let her look." She picked up the notebook. He heard the soft rustle of pages turning. She was photographing it. Not with a camera. Cameras were too loud, too bulky for this era. She was memorizing, or perhaps using a micro camera concealed in her palm. No, it was too dark. She was scanning for codes, for names. The notebook contained nonsense, mixed with a few authentic-looking supply routes for non-lethal military aid. It was bait. She put the book back. She adjusted it to the exact angle it had been lying. Then she leaned close to his face. She whispered something. "Who are you really, Simon?" It was barely a breath, a test. If he was faking sleep, the sudden question might startle him into a reaction. Ari didn't flinch. He let out a snore, a rough, unglamorous sound. She straightened up. He sensed her hesitation. Then she turned and left. Ari waited 10 minutes. Then he tapped a pattern on the bed frame. 3 shorts, 1 long. The signal to the van. Contact made. She is active. The next morning, the dynamic changed. Sarah was warmer. She brought him extra coffee. She lingered longer during the sponge bath. She had found something in the notebook that interested her masters, and now she needed to keep the source happy. She needed him to talk. "You were talking in your sleep last night," she said casually as she opened the curtains. "Was I?" Ari rubbed his eyes. "What did I say? Hopefully nothing about my mother." She laughed. It was a nice sound, but it felt calculated. "No, you kept saying the shipment must go on Tuesday. You sound very dedicated to your job." "Tuesday is the deadline," Ari said, his voice dropping. "If the cargo doesn't move by Tuesday, people don't get paid. And when those people don't get paid, they get angry." "Dangerous people?" she asked, smoothing the blanket. "The kind of people who don't write letters of complaint," Ari said. He looked at her. "Sarah, can I trust you?" She stopped moving. She looked him in the eye. "Of course, Simon. I'm your nurse. I need to make a call," he said. "A secure call, not on the room line. They monitor the room lines. I know they do." "Who monitors them?" "The company. Competitors. I don't know." He feigned paranoia. I need a favor." The hook was in the water. Now he had to see if she would bite, or if she would report him to the clinic administrator as a paranoid patient. "I can't let you use the nurse's station phone," she said. "It's against protocol." "Please," he said. "Just 5 minutes, at night. When the administrator is gone, it's worth a lot to me." She hesitated. It was a calculated pause. "I'll see what I can do," she said. She walked out. Ari exhaled. She was going to let him make the call, and she was going to record it. The waiting is the corrosive part of any operation. It eats at the nerves. Ari lay in the bed, staring at the intricate plaster molding of the ceiling. He had to maintain the facade of the invalid. The logistics man worried about his shipment, while his mind raced through the tactical permutations. If Sarah let him use the phone, she would undoubtedly have a secondary recording device or a way to listen in. That was fine. He wanted her to hear. He wanted her to hear a message so specific, so terrifying to her handlers, that they would be forced to act. The message would be about a package arriving in London, a package that contained the identities of the entire network operating out of the embassy in Paris. It was a lie, of course. But in the world of espionage, the threat of exposure is more potent than a bomb. The afternoon dragged on. A doctor came in, a pompous man who smelled of cigars and dismissed Ari's complaints with a wave of his hand. Healing takes time, Mr. Vance. Patience. Patience. The spy's currency. Sarah returned at 8 p.m. for the night shift. She looked tired, or she was pretending to be. She checked his vitals in silence. "Did you think about what I asked?" Ari whispered. She glanced at the door. "The night porter makes his rounds at 2 a.m. After that, the desk is clear for 20 minutes. "Thank you," Ari said. "You don't know what this means." "I think I do," she said enigmatically. "I'll come for you at 2:10. She gave him his medication. Again, the sleight of hand. The pills went into the hidden cache. He lay back and waited. At 10 p.m., Ari decided to accelerate the timeline. He needed to make her believe he was cracking under the pressure. He started to trash. He pulled at the traction weights. He groaned loudly. Sarah rushed in. "Simon, stop! You'll hurt yourself! They're coming!" Ari shouted, his eyes wide, pupils dilated thanks to the drops. "The deadline! I missed the deadline!" "Shh," she soothed, holding his shoulders down. "You're safe here. Nobody is coming." "You don't understand," he gasped, grabbing her wrist. His grip was strong, desperate. "The ledger. If they find the ledger, it's over. The names. The Nightingale." He felt her freeze. He had used her code name. It was a gamble. Nightingale might have been a Mossad designation for her, but often these names were derived from intercepted chatter. If she knew the name, she would react. She pulled her wrist away. Her breath hitched. "What did you say?" "The Nightingale sang." Ari mumbled, letting his eyes roll back, feigning a slide into drug-induced stupor. "Sang to the wrong people." He went limp. Sarah stood over him. Her breathing was rapid. He could hear the rustle of her uniform as she leaned in. She was checking if he was truly out. She pinched his arm, hard. A pain stimulus. Ari didn't move. He let the pain wash over him, turning it into a distant signal. She walked to the window. She pulled a small device from her pocket. A pager, a radio. He heard 3 clicks. She was signaling an emergency. He had spooked her. Good. A spooked agent makes mistakes. They rush, they break protocol. She came back to the bed. "Simon," she whispered. Silence. "You know too much," she whispered. It was the first time she had dropped the mask completely. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. She paced the room. Ari could sense the indecision. Should she kill him now? An overdose? An air bubble in the IV? It would be easy. Patient complications. Embolism. But she needed to know what he knew. Dead men don't reveal where the ledger is. She left the room. Ari opened his eyes. He was sweating for real now. He had pushed her to the edge. Now he had to hope she didn't decide to push him over it. The hours between midnight and dawn are the witching hours in a hospital. The rhythms of life slow down to a crawl. The air conditioning hums louder. The shadows stretch longer. Ari lay in the dark, his mind sharp, his body limp. He had planted the seed of the Nightingale. Now he had to water it. At 2:10 a.m., exactly as promised, the door opened. Sarah was there. She had a wheelchair. "Simon," she whispered. "It's time." He sat up, groaning. "Help me." She assisted him into the chair. Her strength was surprising. She maneuvered him out of the room and into the corridor. The clinic was a tomb. The nurse's station was empty, illuminated only by the green glow of a monitor. She wheeled him to a small office off the main hallway. "The phone is in there," she said. 5 minutes. I'll watch the hall." Ari wheeled himself in. He picked up the receiver. It was an old rotary dial. He dialed a number, a safe line in London that routed to the Mossad van. "It's Simon," he said into the mouthpiece, his voice trembling. "I'm calling about the delivery." "Go ahead, Simon." Aitan's voice came back, crystal clear. "We are recording." "The package is hot," Ari said. The courier is compromised. We need to switch the route. Tuesday is too late. It has to be tonight." He paused, listening to the silence on the line. "Where is the ledger, Simon?" Aitan asked, playing the role of the anxious boss. "It's safe," Ari said. "It's in the locker, Victoria Station 304. But listen to me. There's a leak. I think the nurse knows." He said it loud enough for it to carry through the closed door. "The nurse?" Aitan asked. "Yes, she asked about the shipment. She knows about the Nightingale." "Neutralize the threat, Simon," Aitan said. "Or get out." "I can't get out," Ari hissed. "I'm crippled here. You have to send someone. Send the cleaner." "Tonight," Aitan said. "Sit tight." Ari hung up. He sat there for a moment, letting the adrenaline subside. He had just painted a target on his own back. He had told the enemy that he was a liability and that cleaners were coming. If Sarah was listening, and she surely was, either through the door or a tap, she now had a deadline. She had to act before his cleaners arrived, or she had to get to Victoria Station first. He wheeled himself out. Sarah was standing by a potted plant, looking at a clipboard. She looked pale. "Done?" she asked. "Yes," Ari said. "Thank you, Sarah. You saved my life." "Let's get you back to bed," she said. Her voice was brittle. Back in the room, she helped him into bed. She didn't check his vitals. She didn't smooth the sheets. She went straight to the door. I have to check on another patient," she said. "Sarah?" "Yes?" "Be careful," he said. She looked at him, and for a second, Ari saw the fear. It was raw and human. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman caught in a machine she couldn't control. "Good night, Simon," she said. She closed the door. Ari grabbed the bed frame. "Here we go." He waited for the signal. 10 minutes later, his earpiece, which he had extracted from the hollow of his cast, crackled. "Target is moving," Aitan said. "She's making a call from the secure line in the administrator's office. We are intercepting." Ari lay back. The trap was sprung. Now they just had to see what she caught.